Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hempstead. This is going to be my last video of the year. It's kind of crazy. Before I get into this video, I just want to take a quick second and let you guys know that you are in my thoughts. You are in my, I don't exactly pray per se, but you are in my metaphorical prayers. And I'm really hoping that you guys are doing okay and that, things are going as well as they possibly can be, all things considered. That being said, I do want to get into the last lesson and frankly one of the most important lessons of the year. So, this lesson is basically about two things. It's about how bad is climate change and how can we fix it. And so the first part of the video I'll be addressing, just the severity, the problems, the big issues with climate change, and then we'll be going into what are the best ways to solve those problems. Before I forget, today, Wednesday, is the second to last locker cleanout day. There will be one more sometime next week, and that's it. So get your stuff. Okay. All right, so Earth has gotten about 2.1 degrees Celsius warmer, or about 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. This could rise as much to about 4 or 8 degrees Celsius. This is a really big problem. Does that statement actually make you want to do something to save the Earth? If so, how? I'll be honest with you. It doesn't for me. I look at those numbers and I'm like, great. Minnesota is cold AF. We would much rather, have a warmer winter. Sounds good to me. Additionally, it kind of seems sort of small. And it really doesn't hit home. Why should I care if the temperature goes up a little bit? And I could actually even go into more detail, and I could tell you factually and statistics and numbers and data and graph. But that doesn't actually work. See, if you're trying to sell anything, you can't use data to do it. Most of the time, data won't do it. Sometimes it will. Maybe if you're like selling a car or something, you can say, oh, this car is really, really cheap. But it's the underlying principle that that car is a good deal that sells the car, not the fact that, the value of it is somewhat less. People think with emotions more than they think with logic. Some people can and do think logically. They are a minority. If you want to sell climate change, that climate change is an issue that needs to be solved, you need to go after the emotional target. That's the only way it's going to work. Since the 70s, scientists, being the logical thinkers that they are and that we are, use numbers and data and statistic to try and say, look, we really need to do something about climate change soon. It's going to get worse. It's getting worse. It's gotten worse. And nothing happened because people were not emotionally impacted by the data. If I tell you guys that you are condemning your children to a life of food shortages, water shortages, medical shortages, if you do not act on climate change, that resonates a little bit. We care about our children. We don't want this world to be a hardship for them. That's how you convince people to do something about climate change. So how bad is it? After all, I'm trying to convince you how bad it is, so let's think about this in terms of a little bit of logic and emotion, I think is the best way to do it. So I believe it was on Thursday of last week, I mentioned something called the permafrost. It's a thin layer of ice that covers the Earth. The Earth is getting warmer. What happens to ice when it gets warmer? Permafrost, it's trapping a lot of greenhouse gases in the Earth. It's what's called a carbon trap, like a rainforest. What happens to those greenhouse gases when the ice melts? What happens to the global temperature when those greenhouse gases get released? What happens to the rest of the ice? This is called a positive feedback cycle. It's where one part of the cycle causes the next part of the cycle to go, which causes the first part of the cycle to go. And it's this unending relationship between temperature and greenhouse gases being released that is the crux of the problem with climate change. This has also been referred to as the tipping point. Now that I've introduced you to the tipping point, allow me to let you say goodbye, because we passed it about 5 years ago. Climate change has happened. Climate change is going to happen. There's nothing we can do about that. Our goal is not to stop climate change, because it has already started and it's going to get worse. Our job is to lessen climate change, to make it so that our children live lives that are as least hard as that are least hard lives as possible. So, how do we do it? There's going to be resource shortages. People aren't always going to have access to clean water. Look at Flint, Michigan. That's just the beginning. People are going to have to leave their homes. Florida is going to lose about 10% of its land. All those people living on the coast are going to have to migrate. Look, no coasts. Wonder where they're going to migrate to. Species are going to go extinct. We're experiencing we're experiencing the 6th greatest mass extinction ever in the entire history of Earth. A lot of species are going to go extinct. Some people will die. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people are already dying each year from climate change, and that's only going to get worse as the temperature gets worse. So all these things are happening. How do we make it happen less? So the first thing that you guys need to understand is that you can't do this alone. It'd be very nice if by just, taking shorter showers and replacing fluorescent bulbs with LED bulbs and, using a little bit less electricity, we could solve climate change. That would be a lovely, lovely thought. And that's good. Don't get me wrong. Every little bit helps. But quite frankly, the only reason any of us are going to make a big enough impact is to have a revolution. Back when Bernie Sanders was running for presidency, he said that the only way we can solve climate change is by having the largest revolution the world has ever seen. The largest revolution the world has ever seen. And I think at the time that he said that that was true. I think today, the second largest would do the trick. For the first time in the history of mankind, the world is unified under one banner to stop the coronavirus. Every single country, every single lab that can is devoting energy and dollars towards finding a vaccine for researching and understanding coronavirus. This is huge. And it is that kind of energy that we're going to need in order to stop climate change, or I guess I should say to lessen climate change. So, how do you do that? After all, you're not scientists at that scale yet. You're scientists in my book, but you're not researchers, right? So you can't do the research. But you can talk to government officials, right? You can tell them to implement a carbon tax. Big idea. Putting it in bold, okay? Carbon tax is huge. A carbon tax means any time that somebody is producing excessive amounts of carbon, they pay a tax, and the money from that tax is used to do things that are better for the environment. Thus, carbon goes into the environment, money is paid to the government for that carbon going into the environment. The government then spends that money to take the carbon out of the environment. The carbon effect is neutral, the carbon footprint is zero. The business gets what they need, the people get what they need, the environment gets what they need. Everyone wins, except the business has to pay a little bit more money and raise their prices a little bit. Okay. Admittedly, there are a lot of big problems going on, social justice-wise, coronavirus-wise. Our representatives are a little busy at the moment. You should still use your voice. But if you choose to use your voice on things other than climate change right now, that's still very good, right? So in the meantime, besides going to the government, what can we individuals do to lessen the impact of climate change? Basically comes down to using less stuff. American economics is based around the principle of buy, 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 buy. Americans buy and use and spend more than any other citizen in the world because that's how our economy functions so well. It's because we spend money and then other people can spend the money, and the money just keeps going around and around and around in a circle, and a lot of stuff gets used. And that worked great for a while, but the problem is we're using so much stuff and there's only so much stuff. What happens when we run out of oil? Oil is a finite resource. Eventually, there will not be oil we can pump out of the ground. We need alternatives. What happens when we run out of gold? We use gold in a lot of... There's gold in the computer that you're watching me from right now. There's gold in your cell phone. What happens when we run out of gold, right? There's only so much gold we can get. There's going to be shortages. Okay. One thing you should be happy to note is that your carbon footprint, the amount of carbon that you personally are putting out in the atmosphere, is relatively small. Congratulations. The problem comes in when you get older, right? When we get older, we start having children, and those children have a big carbon imprint as they grow older. I'm not going to ask you not to have kids. I'm never going to ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. However, Americans do like to drive big cars. We like big trucks. They make us feel safe. We like big cars for the same reason. Because if a smaller car hits us, we're in a bigger car. It's not going to do that much. But big cars burn a lot of gas for their entire life. For 10 to 15 years, it's getting way, way worse fuel economy. Just don't get the really bad trucks, right? Don't get the biggest cars. Get the medium cars or the smaller cars. That will have a really big impact environmentally, is to drive a smaller car. We use more energy in just about everything we do. There are a lot of little things you can do to help. I'm not going to go into those right now, but you've heard them before. They exist. I mentioned them a little bit in one of the PowerPoints, but I'm focusing on the big things that we can do. So things like taking shorter showers, good, right, but not going to change the world one person at a time with that. One thing that will change the world one person at a time is eating less red meat. This has a really big impact. But Mr. Hempstead, I really like meat. It's really tasty. Mr. Hempstead likes meat too. Meat is very tasty. A little bit of meat is even very good for you, right? I'm not asking you to give up meat, although I have. I'm just asking you to eat specifically less beef. That's the really big culprit here. Cows are 400 times worse per pound than chickens. Go chickens, go! We like chicken. It is both tasty, it is good for the environment, it is healthier than beef. Hooray, chickens. Chickens are very good. If you're going to eat meat, eat chicken meat. However, turkeys, fish, wild game such as venison or deer, all really good. Even though venison is technically red meat, as long as it is wild game, deer are overpopulated right now. So by killing and eating the deer, you're actually having a positive environmental impact and getting red meat. Pigs, frankly, aren't bad. They're about 30 times worse than chickens, but that's still considerably better than cows, so if it comes down to between eating pork and eating beef, take pork. Okay. My personal research is all about this. It's all about the agricultural industry's impact on climate change. I know a lot, way more than I need to know about this particular topic. If you want to know more, I would first recommend watching the video Cowspiracy. This movie changed my life in a very positive way. It's too long for me to post, especially this close to the end of the year, but it effectively explains why cows are killing the world, and it's revolutionary. Alright, what are the big takeaways from this final video? If you're trying to convince somebody to frankly do anything, but especially if you're trying to convince people to help with climate change, target their emotions rather than logic. They'll listen. Use your voice. You have a great one. Let it be heard. I didn't mention it in the video, but social media